Hey there, my friend Steve Gamlin here in the Motivational Firewood recording studios, and it's one of my favorite days of all. And the favorite days are when I actually get to have really cool conversations with people. Because believe me, when you're stuck here alone in the studio long enough, you get tired of just hearing your own stuff. So basically, this is the equivalent of me leaving my nice warm home in the woods of southern New Hampshire and going out for a coffee, which I don't drink. So today we are talking with Oleg Lougheed. Oleg is a guy that I crossed paths with recently. He was on my good buddy Brian K. Wright's Success Profiles radio show. And Brian sent me a message and said, you need to talk to Oleg. And I've already had the great joy of being on Oleg's radio show, and now am returning the favor. So Oleg, welcome to Motivational Firewood Radio.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me here. And as a way to actually begin this, I would like to express a moment of gratitude to you for having me on your show. But I think also just following up and following through on your initial request. I think that's one of the biggest things that I've learned after interacting with so many different people is that we'll make the initial connection, but we won't actually follow through on the request. And so yeah, I really am grateful for people like that because it aligns with who I am and who I'm trying to be ultimately.
And I'm grateful to you as well. And I'm going to add a bit of gratitude to that, to my team, Lonnie Robinson, Chris Whitehead, et cetera, from Robinson Infomedia Services, who forced me to get an online scheduler. They saw a picture of my office and
Pretty helpful tool nowadays.
They go, what are all those sticky notes all over the wall? I go, oh, those are people I need to connect with. And they go, bro, we're going to build you. And I tell you what, here's the thing. The right people have come into my life, and the right people get scheduled. It's not just a, hey, let's get to this. It's definite on this day. We're locked in. We both get notified. So if I turn on the ceiling fan by accident and a couple sticky notes fall off the wall, I'm not blowing people off because it's not in my nature to do so intentionally because I hate to disappoint people. So I am equally honored that you agreed to be part of my show. And if you would, just give people a little, broad brush of who you are and what got you to this point.
I appreciate you asking that question. So who I am, that's a very loaded question to begin with, in trying to really break down this onion of many, many layers that I've made up. Who I am is I was someone who was born in Russia, as you were able to tell by the name. And for my first 12 years of my life, I didn't have the traditional upbringing, as I think most kids are able to have. And that is, I didn't really have a set of parents to rely on, which put me on this journey of self-discovery and what it was like to be an adult from a very young age. So finding the resources when it came to food, shelter, and things like that was just part of my norm. It was really survival and figuring it out from day to day. But fortunately enough, I was able to be adopted at the age of 12 by a family from Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I ended up coming here. I didn't speak English, or I knew very, very little. I knew probably 5 to 10 words, maybe. And some of the words you couldn't even use in a conversation. So it was difficult to even have a conversation to begin with. But ultimately, what I've learned is that it is all of those experiences and events that have led me to this position where I am today in creating a space and a platform for other people to share their experiences, to know that their voices are being supported, heard, and that there's a community of others along this journey who have gone or are going through similar challenges. You know, as you mentioned before, prior to the show, is that we're never alone. I firmly believe that. I think there's at least one other person who has traveled along a similar path, not the same exact path, because I do believe that we have our own unique paths within this life. And so the decisions we make and the people that we meet are going to be slightly different as far as the exact moments of that instance. But I think overall, the principles and the things that we might all be looking for are relatively similar. I mean, I firmly believe that most of us are looking for a way to connect, to belong, to be supported, to be loved, to be cared for. And so as long as I continue to believe in those universal principles, I think that's what's going to allow me to understand that we are much more similar than we think we are. And that despite of our uniqueness, I can still find common ground with whoever it is on this
Mhm.
planet. I was making a joke with a friend of mine yesterday, and we were saying how there are two types of people in this world. You have those that attract towards positivity, and then you have those that attract towards negativity. And I'm sure there are many other types beyond that.
Yep.
But she was saying how, how is it that there are people who are negative that exist in this world? And I said, well, think about just how the life works. Think about cause and effect. Any other instances, you have a positive and you have a negative. And it's not to say one is bad, it just is. And so those that tend to gravitate towards negative energy, it doesn't make them bad people. It's just who they are. I mean, it's just how they're wired. Think about in your case, you attract people who are positive within your life, and you structure your lifestyle according to the same principles.
Hmm.
So I think it's important to really understand that there are certain things in life and they just are. There's just there's no reason to label them as good or bad. It just is. And I think once I understood that, that's ultimately what helped me really connect with other people across so many different paths. And if I do encounter someone who has come from a different background, I think it just gives me an opportunity to start a dialogue, to understand their own experience. Why are they like that? Why do they think like that? Why do they do things in that way?
Mm.
And I think that's where the curiosity really grows in individuals in general, is then you are putting yourself in a position where you're not judging them, you're not comparing them to other people within your network, but rather you're looking at each one of them and you're there to learn about that person's existence, their values, what they stand for, and why they think the way they do.
Hmm. Yeah. I think it's so funny because the what I call the great petri dish of social media
Mm-hmm.
is such an example of that. Because if you go on, and I'm not sure if you're on any small community uh, Facebook pages, but boy, you see every range of
Mm-hmm.
human emotion and human attitude, etc.
Yeah.
There was someone I saw the other day, a young woman, I believe she's in her mid 20s or so, horrifically addicted to drugs, and they showed
Mm-hmm.
one of her uh, booking pictures from a police station, and it's just horrible mess. And in the past, being of a humorous background, comedy, radio, etc., I used to
Mm-hmm.
pile on to people like that. But now it's funny, over the past decade, doing what I do for a living, intentionally being positive, I have so much more sympathy and empathy for people who maybe made one bad decision,
Yeah.
right? Something happened to them and it took them down a certain way. And it's not for me to pile on. It's not for me to call her bad or good, or myself
Mm-hmm.
above or below someone else. And I just saw a bunch of people piling on, and I didn't want to go on there and tell them that they were wrong. What I said was, I sincerely hope that she gets the help that she needs and is willing to accept it. And
Yes.
people around her who are embracing sobriety as a positive example and a hand let out. And I also added, P.S., I'm not here to argue with anyone or tell anyone here that they're wrong. You're
Mm-hmm.
doing what's right for you,
Yeah.
and you got to live with your decisions. But yet I just find myself attracting more and more good people
Mm-hmm.
by even just trying to be a living, breathing example in the middle of chaos, and not tell people this is the way you should be, but
Yeah.
just to kind of throw that little life raft out there. And anybody who wants to grab onto it can, and maybe have a better outcome that day.
Mm-hmm. And we all make mistakes. I think
Yeah.
that's the part of this journey is we I constantly see messages that point out certain failures and weaknesses, and failure, I think, is just an opportunity to learn if you choose to step back and reflect upon your progress.
Yep.
So I think it's meant to be part of this journey. And you are right. What's interesting about some of the decisions we make is that different decisions bring different consequences. So if you drive drunk and you go to jail, it's slightly different than being caught shoplifting in a grocery store or breaking a glass full of water or whatever it is.
Mhm.
And as part of it, I think what you just noted is that every decision, there's no reason to compare one decision to another because they're all along different extremes. So if someone was in jail or someone is trying to get out of a condition where they were an alcoholic, there's no reason to blame them, but
Mm,
rather just be of support. And I like what you're saying, and I like this community that you've developed to begin with, is that let's just support each other along the way, because we're all at different chapters of our lives.
mm,
You might be at the very beginning of something that you're starting. I might be in the middle. Someone else might be at the end. And it doesn't make any of us less than or better than the other. We just are, because we are along different paths. We're taking different courses. We're taking different actions.
mhm.
So why don't we just focus on the community at hand and support each other regardless of where we are along this journey?
Yep, yep. And it is so important, like you said, we never know where somebody is in their journey, and it has nothing to do with the number of candles on your birthday cake.
Exactly.
At the time of this recording, I'm 51 years old. I'm 15 years into a speaking career after
Mm-hmm.
10 years of radio. Now, in there was 7 years as a stand-up comedian as well. And it's funny, for the highs and the lows and the challenges and the best days and the worst days of all of that, every single day I wake up and realize that I'm at a very crucial part. And I feel like I'm still at the beginning of a journey, because I'm still trying to get better as a human being
Mm-hmm.
and as a person who walks his talk. And, we all say and do things sometimes that somebody go, wow, that I didn't expect that to come out of your mouth. Like, wow,
Mm-hmm.
what triggered that? What do I need to work on now
Yeah.
to maybe be more understanding? Or what did I allow to get in there and grind on me today, that something that negative just came out? Because,
Mm-hmm.
and I've gone back and I've edited or removed Facebook posts before, social media posts,
Mm-hmm.
where somebody will say, wow, Steve, you okay? I'm like, yeah, why?
Mm-hmm.
I just read what you posted, and boy, that doesn't sound like you. And I go back and read it. I go, oh yeah, I was in a bad mood. And then I'll typically go back and remove it and saying, you know what, that person did not deserve what I just said. And if I was just being me and offered
Mm-hmm.
something positive, maybe that could have had an impact on that person. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll generally go back and edit myself,
Yeah.
because not, and I want people to understand, you and I are both on personal development journeys, that we
Mm-hmm.
not only are trying to groom ourselves to be better, but we also try to attract and help inspire and maybe share a bit of knowledge for other people. So we are works in progress at all times.
Yeah.
Somebody called me a guru one time and I just cringed. That word just, I'm not the guru. I'm a regular, everyday blue collar guy who just happened to have the right people in his life at the right time when he made the right choices.
Mm-hmm.
And now hopefully is turning around and holding a hand out to other people to help them out.
Well, what's interesting about what you just said is that I think for me, it's important to share this whole journey and to document as much as I can. So when you talk about going back and erasing certain posts, I've certainly done that. I've done that. I remember when I was first, this was many years ago, starting to understand the power of our words and our actions and how it can influence other people, especially those that are closest to me. And that's what I would go back into my feed and delete certain things that I didn't think would serve other people in that way. But what I've learned over time is that even though there might be that might be okay to do so, but it's also, I think, important to show your whole journey and to help people understand that it is okay to process certain things. Just like you said, it is okay to be sad sometimes. It's okay to cry. It's okay to laugh. And I think that's one of the things that has been missing, or not necessarily missing, but maybe defined in a different way, is that when we look at success, we only see, the iceberg. We only see that final moment where it's like, boom, it all makes sense. But as I've said before on other shows, it's success is not a destination. Success is a process. It's who you become along the journey of going towards X, Y, and Z target. That's what makes you successful. I mean, it's being able to embrace the times when you are forced to fall back. It's the times where you have to get back on a horse and keep going. It's the conversations that you have to have along the way. And so it's everything that makes you successful. And I think we have this misunderstanding that if I get through X, Y, and Z, then I'm going to be successful. Well,
Mm.
no, you're already successful now. And so, when you speak about documenting your journey and the process and really being invested in this personal development space, I mean, I think we should all be in the space of personal development. I
Mm.
think we should all strive to be the best versions of who we are. And with that said, the best version of who you are is not the version that Tony Robbins portrays or Oprah. The best version is you. Um, I was yesterday. I was actually reflecting back upon this image that I've had for my life, and I was writing an article, and it was titled "Can I Change the World?" And what was interesting after I was looking at that was for a long time prior to maybe a couple years ago, I had this image that I truly didn't believe I could change the world because the world is so big. And when you think about the number of lives, what is it, 7.5 billion people
Yes. Yeah.
on this planet, and it was such an overwhelming number to think of. But what I've realized recently was that you get to redefine that. And you get to redefine that in I guess two ways you could say. The world, the world doesn't have to be the entire planet.
Mm.
The world can just be the people that you are in contact with.
Hmm.
The world could be the stranger that you pass by at the grocery store. And then the second aspect I was looking was change. I before that I used to think that change has to happen in this like dramatic fashion. I mean, when it reminds me of any of the Batman movies where the whole world or a whole city gets taken over, and there's this hero comes in and saves everyone's lives.
Mm.
Well, change doesn't have to happen that way. I mean, change could be relatively simple, and you get to define what that change may be. A change could literally be a smile at a person to brighten their day. A change could be you holding a door for someone. A change could be you delivering a newspaper to the person's front door or helping them in some other way. And I think once I was able to understand that, that's when I was really able to step into this kind of best version of who I am and actually make a difference and know that I'm making a difference, because it's no longer this big, big picture like, oh, I'm not impacting all of the people on this planet, but that's okay.
Mm.
You're impacting your own world, just like you're doing. And then throughout it, what's also fascinating is that the more that you connect to other people in other worlds, that's how you're impacting their world too.
Mm.
And that's where I think the ripple effect happens. And then we're able to come to this position where we're able to impact people beyond us and other worlds. So once I had that realization, it kind of just made sense to me. It's like, there's no reason to try and influence all of the people on this planet. Just do with what you know to the best of your ability.
Mm.
And your world could only be one person, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Could be 10 people.
Yep.
It's going to be different per person based on who you know and how well connected you feel to each one.
Mm.
So I think it's important to note that we can all be change makers during this lifetime, and we can all make a difference. And just because the difference, it doesn't seem quote unquote big, that's okay, because there's no action, I think, too small to make an impact.
Mm. There was a movie, I want to say came out maybe 15, 20 years ago, and the title escapes me. But essentially, it was as people were going through their daily lives or even walking down the street, one person was possessed by this evil spirit. And as this
Mm-hmm.
person touched another, it transferred.
Mm-hmm.
And so the people who were trying to capture and, of course, defeat the evil spirit could not keep track of who's touching the spirit now. But
Yeah.
one person touches the other, then that person's now evil, and they were trying to go on. And what you're talking about and what I try to do as well is be the good version of that. But
Mm-hmm.
when we touch somebody, that we don't lose it. It just continues to grow. It's like a starfish continues to grow. If it
Yeah.
loses one of its limbs, it grows it back. So you maintain it, but yet you're infecting
Yeah.
so many other people with it, and it is a blast. And just like what you said, because it made me think of a situation that happened to me. when you do something just because in that moment you say, what can I do right now to leave this situation better than I found it? And
Mm-hmm.
it becomes habitual because you don't have to think it every time. Once held the door open for this gentleman. He was in his early 80s, and I saw by his cap that he was a World War II veteran. So
Mm-hmm.
I said, sir, let me, he started to do that little old man jog. And I said, sir. I said, no need to rush. I said, first off, thank you so much for your service. My grandfather was a tail gunner in World War II. I said, second, I'm self-employed. There is nobody screaming for me to come out. And he laughed like you just did. And he says, thank you, young man. He goes, good to see young people with manners. And at the time I was 48, I go, how old do you think I am? He goes, younger than me, young fella, younger than me. Well, now we're both laughing. And that's the first part of the lesson. I was having a horrible day, which is the only reason I was at the post office.
Uh-huh.
Couldn't pay my bills that month. A check that a client owed me did not come in. And I drove to the post office to just get out of my office and being miserable, just in case there was a miracle and there was a check there. And what I got instead was this example of
Yeah.
being connected. And here's the chaser to that. A little kid, 5 years old, was inside that door with his mom in the ATM lobby. And he looked up
Mm-hmm.
at this man, and this little 5-year-old kid opens the inside door for him.
Mm.
Now, I'm not saying it's just because he saw me. I'm sure his mom and dad are just raising a really nice young man. But the mom looked down, and the gentleman looked at her and says, you have a fine young man there. And he pulled out $1 and he gave it to the kid.
Mm-hmm.
And the mother was just about bawling. And of course, me coming from a comedic background looks at him and says, I held the first door, and I hold my hand up. And he slaps me 5 and I slap him. And I walked out of there a different person than I'd walked in.
Yeah.
And that young man got the pride of doing a kind act and being rewarded for it. And the gentleman got honored because he's one of our veterans who fought for freedom. And 2 guys younger than him opened the door. And
Mm-hmm.
it was all because in a moment of me being in a really bad mood, I made a better decision.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of my favorite stage stories to share. I've been sharing it for several years now. And
Mm-hmm.
it's such a thing, like you said, no matter where you are or what's inside you, you can make a decision to create something positive, and you might just find out the person who benefits most from it is actually you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, what's interesting within that is there's almost no reason to even know the origin of that particular action as far as, well, who impacted me to think this way. Or I think it's important to be able to take a step back and express gratitude to those people. But ultimately, I think it's you that gets to choose. It's you that gets to create that action. And I mean, you can impact people on a daily basis. I think no matter what state of being you are in, you might be in positions where you don't have certain things resolved when it comes to, just you mentioned, like yourself, finances and things like that. But that's okay. I mean, it's not the end of your world. And I think that's one of the things that we think sometimes is because we're facing this big adversity in our life, that this is it. It's a life or death situation.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, it, even if you are owed certain things, it's like, someone, sure, you'll get notices and things like that, but it's not notices of you dying. It's not notices of you being killed for it. And eventually, I think through time, you'll figure it out. You find a way to work through whatever the challenge is. And I think the most important part of it all is just don't give up. Don't give up along the journey.
Mm.
Believe in yourself. I remember I was having a conversation with Brian actually on his show, and he asked me this question of, what would you tell a younger version of yourself? And I said to never give up, and then he responded with, I would tell myself to believe in myself more. And
Mm.
it's so important because I think the more we believe in ourselves, it truly does pass on to other people. We talk
Mm.
about impacting others. People can see when you are confident and you believe in yourself.
Yeah.
And in turn, you help them develop their confidence and their own self belief. And so everything that they've become or everything that they worked for and all the challenges that they're going through, they no longer seem so daunting or overwhelming.
Mm.
Because if I can hear you go through whatever adversity you've gone through, well, that helps me understand that what I'm experiencing, it's temporary, that I can get through it. You have. So why can't I?
Yeah. It's funny when you're talking about confidence and people observing you, it made me think of something that I haven't thought of. Oh gosh, in about 10 years now. About that time ago, about a decade ago, I was one of our area directors for an organization called BNI, Business Networking
Mm-hmm.
International. And there were chapters, and I was one of the directors and one of the trainers. And I needed to go to one of the chapters I was a director of and meet them at the end of their meeting. So I was kind of walking in as they were wrapping up,
Mm-hmm.
and it was cold out, and I was bundled up, and I was had a long walk up the driveway, and somebody that was in that chapter, who somebody I had gone to high school with and hadn't seen in 20 years, he came over and he just started doing some graphic design work for me. And he come over, he goes, man, I got to tell you, I never saw you in the 4 years of high school walk with as much confidence as I just saw you walk past that window with. He goes, what, you believe in yourself more or whatever, or you're sure of your mission, or you're comfortable in your skin. He goes, I don't know what it is. He goes, but I just wanted to tell you,
Mm-hmm.
man, he goes, I didn't realize you were that tall because you weren't
Mm-hmm.
walking slumped over. And
Mm-hmm.
it meant a lot to me. And, and people say, well, how do you know if something means a lot to you? It's 10 years ago when I'm still talking about it and reliving the
Exactly.
emotions of it.
Mm-hmm.
That means a lot. And
And
I just,
telling that to people is
yes,
important. I think
yes.
helping them recognize their own strengths, because
Yep.
we take some of those things for granted
Mm,
because we do them every day.
yeah.
I mean, I don't stop and pat myself on the back for putting a smile on someone else's face, because
Mm,
it's just what I do. It's
yeah.
just who I am. And so when people take the time to tell you, "Hey, I appreciate you for this," or "Have you noticed what you just did and how that impacted that person's life?"
Mm,
And then it helps you better tap into, I think, your strengths
yeah.
and really understand what your strengths are. Because for the longest time, for me, and along my particular journey, I remember I used to look at my strengths, or I used to look for them, not at them.
Mm,
And it was a difficult journey for me because I'm a thinker. So whenever I have a thought, I'll overthink it. I'll analyze it in ways that didn't even think was possible. And with strengths, it was the same exact thing. I remember I was sitting down and I pulled out a white sheet of paper and I wrote down my strengths, my weaknesses, and the areas that I wanted to improve in. And as I was writing down each one, it began to appear to me that each one of the lists was becoming kind of never-ending lists. And you can sit there and list off one thing after another, and it was okay. But there was a moment I remember for the strength section, I could only list off like three things.
mm,
And it just made me think, I was like, well, there are 50 areas of quote unquote weaknesses and areas that I need to improve in. There's
yeah.
got to be equal balance for the strengths for each
Mm,
one of those. And what I've learned over time is that it's the small acts that I missed.
yeah.
It's the times that I'm grateful. It's the times that I connect with other people and just give them a space to speak, to process. That's a
Mm,
strength of who you are.
yeah.
But we take it for granted because we do it so often. And it does become a habit of ours. And so we don't give it the proper acknowledgement. And it truly does make you unique, though,
Mm-hmm.
because not everyone's like that.
No, and that's so true. And you reminded me of a video challenge that I was part of.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, 2000, well, it was 8 years ago. And I rarely did YouTube videos. And of course, Facebook Live and the platforms like this were not around quite yet. And somebody said, okay, I need you to be part of a 30-day challenge. We'll give you the theme every day. All you gotta do is get on the camera and answer this question or explore this theme and go. And they were beating me up really bad because I'd done a live speaking event with some of these people, and they got on me for being self-deprecating. And they said, why don't you
Mm-hmm.
do video? I go, because hair not perfect, face not perfect, smile not perfect, body not perfect,
Mm.
blah, blah, blah. And they said, you're doing this. So near the end of the first day, one of them reaches out, where's your video? I'm not seeing it. and I'd
Mhm.
done about 20 takes in a row, hated one more than the rest. And I mean, my two outtake words every single time was, "Oh, you suck." And
Mhm.
then, "Hi, this," trying to come back and be the perfect thing. And finally, I just cobbled together this crappy message, which I've since deleted. And I posted it, I uploaded it, and basically I probably took a picture of me flipping off the camera and sent it and go, fine, there, it's done. It sucks, but it's done. 3 days later, somebody sent me a message. He goes, "Oh, Steve, oh my gosh, thank you so much for that video. How did you know I needed to hear that day?"
Yeah.
And what I perceived as a weakness of not being comfortable on camera, not being comfortable,
Mhm.
with all my imperfections, all of a sudden I realized that what I was perfect at was just being me,
Yeah.
and just being open and honest with whatever my answer was to a particular question to give guidance to someone else. And they responded, and someone who I didn't even know responded positively.
Mhm.
And I said, that was the day that none of this matters.
Yes.
It's what's in my heart and my mind, and what comes out my mouth, or what I write with my hands.
Yeah.
And ever since then, people challenge me again. I've been part of Facebook Live challenges, the Zoom challenge.
Mhm.
I used to just say, let's just get on the phone and talk and not be on camera.
Yeah.
But now it just lets me be imperfectly me. And
Yeah.
I don't see it as a weakness. I see it as, this is as strong as I can be right now. But if I keep doing better, I'm going to be stronger.
Yeah.
So this goes on the strength uh, woodpile now.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of the things that you said they were outnumbered 50-3.
Yeah.
I bet a lot of the ones that you thought were weaknesses were what other people would look at and go, oh, like, oh my God, you're great at this.
Yeah.
But maybe you haven't, I mean, your podcast is called Overcoming Odds.
Yeah.
Maybe our self perception is one of the things we have to overcome the most sometimes. I know that's the case.
Mhm. And that's an interesting point because I mean, I think we are our biggest critics.
Mm,
And so learning how to work with the imperfections, I think that's the name of the game.
mhm.
And
Yeah,
that's what
I've
life boils down
savaged
to.
myself over the year. I mean, I get brutal on myself,
Yeah.
and I've even done it at live events. And generally, I'll come back and laugh and go, okay, that was me then. One time, I didn't come back from that, and I got called out on it big time by the
Mhm.
organizers of the event, who've since become dear friends. And they said, okay, we get where you were going, but you didn't come back. We're over here going, Steve, come on,
Yeah.
reel it in. And just that one day I was in a bad mood, and I took it out on myself in front of 40, 50 people in an audience. And the sad part was, I caused myself to believe it.
Yeah.
It took me off my game, and it didn't allow me to inspire other people.
Mhm. And
I
you
came
you
down
you
but didn't
become
come
what
back
you
up.
say,
Yeah, yeah.
you
And
know?
somebody said it perfectly. They said, we just watched you deconstruct yourself in front of an audience and tear yourself apart
Mhm.
without the positive message that usually comes on the backside of it. So if your life has ever been like that,
Hmm.
here's where I came now. Nope, I stayed right down there. I pulled the
No, it's
lid
a
off the tank and cannonballed off the high board right into it. And they were dead on right. What I did was I did a disservice to them,
yeah.
doing a disservice to myself in the
Mhm.
process. Yeah. So
I think it's one thing to put on a mask and hide some of the things that we're going through, and it's a whole other thing to actually work through them. And you're right, there are ways to work through them in a productive manner. And I think one of the things that I've learned is just inviting other people to be a part of that dialogue.
mm,
So instead of holding the whole thing back, kind of just almost posing the question to them and creating a space where I can process what I'm going through their own experiences. So the story that you mentioned about the stage, it's interesting because one of the things that I learned throughout our events that we host is that it really does create this space where people can be themselves. And everything that you just mentioned prior, I think it all boils down to finding the courage to be you
mm,
and not having your your environment and things like that stop you from doing the work that you are intended to do. I mean, when you think about typical appearances on camera and things like that, it's everything has to be tight. You got to wear this jacket, and your hair has to look a certain way.
Yeah.
But recently, I just realized that it's not about the appearance. Sure, you could say that appearance shows confidence in some settings, but at the same time, it's all about the message. I think your body language and the way that you present that particular message is stronger than what you wear.
Hmm.
And once I understood that, and this is how you and I began this conversation to begin with, it is that it doesn't really matter, I think, the quality of the audio and the quantity of how often you put it out. It's the quality. It's what you say during that. That's what matters.
Mm.
You know, I've always believed it's quality over quantity, but the quality part, it's not necessarily having the perfect conditions or waiting until that moment when you're going to be ready. Because let's be honest, we're never ready for anything.
Right.
As soon as we think we know something and we step into that field, it turns out to be completely different from what we envisioned.
Mm.
So we're never truly ready. So we might as well just step into it now with what we know.
Yep.
And that's how I think we put ourselves in positions to learn and really explore and be curious along the journey. And the other point that you mentioned was, beating yourself up. I think a lot of us do that. I've done that, and I probably still do it to a degree.
Hmm.
And I think the reason why is because I set myself to such a high standard that when it comes to performance or relationships or whatever it may be, I know that I can be better than what I tell myself.
Mm.
And so, as part of that mindset, you put yourselves in positions where it is just the unknown. You have no idea how to get past a certain challenge or what, or how you're going to work through it. And so, in moments like that, instead of looking back and saying, "Oh, I suck. I can't believe I did this," just look at yourself and say, "I'm grateful for that."
Yeah. Yeah. My buddy Max Nace and Chris Whitehead and all those guys, they always tell me, embrace the suck.
Yeah.
Chris Whitehead always says, lean into the suck,
Yeah.
because you're going to learn so much more from it. If we're afraid to fail, that if we're so afraid to fail that we don't try anything, we don't try to be a better version of ourselves, even though we may not be happy with where we're at right now.
Yeah.
If we're not willing to try and fail, I tell everybody, scars tell stories, and scars are a really badass testament to the fact that you tried something.
Yes.
And sometimes you tried and it hurt and you learned something from it. And then you have that cool story. I got people say, somebody asked me recently, that's wonderful. How do you make up all those stories you tell on stage? And I went,
Just keep
have you
trying.
not been paying attention to my life the last 20 years and what I've done to it? I said, oh, believe me. I said, I appreciate that you see the value in the stories, but believe me, I lived every single one of them.
and and the cool part about it is that it's all part of a bigger story. So there's always a story that you can tell about the experience.
Yeah.
And the interesting part is that you get to choose what story you tell about it
Mm.
and how you tell it. And it's also okay to, I think, rewrite that story at any given point of your life,
Hmm.
regardless of what your age may be. Whether you're in 50s, 60s, 70s, 20s, you can rewrite that aspect. You can develop a different perspective around the particular experience.
Mm.
And I mean, I think that's what helped me become the best version of who I am, is once I was able to step into that point and develop a different perspective and know that there's a different perspective to every story that I choose to tell myself or hear.
Yeah.
So whenever you hear something about whoever it may be, there's always the other side to that story. And there's always a side to that story and to that story. It
Mm.
all depends on who you ask. I
Yeah.
mean, it's that example of you have 10 people looking at the same object and all 10 see 10 different things.
Mm. Yep.
And it could be as simple as a water bottle or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And to you, it's like, well, there's just one thing, but to someone else, it's a completely different thing. And
Yeah.
it all depends on where they are within their life and what they're going through. You know,
Hmm.
if you're experiencing a moment of despair or anger or happiness, the things that you see are going to be different because you choose to view that particular thing from the lens that you are living through right now.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to also understand that we can always develop a different perspective around it. And, you know, as part of this journey, it's okay. The it's okay. What I've learned, it's okay to be you with the information that you know now. And it's okay for you to develop that as you move forward.
Yeah.
And when people come back to you and say, "Hey, Steve, I thought you were this person, or I thought you were this company, or this brand, or this organization," you are all of those. It's just that every single one of them has led you to become this other thing now, but it's all one at all times.
Right.
You know, when I was younger, I used to, my best friend and I, we started a lawn mowing company. And this was like way back in the day. And we would actually, in the winter, we would go from door to door and shovel people's driveways
Hmm.
for 30 or $40.
Nice.
And, you know, I'm not that now, but I will always be that person. I'll always be that skill set.
Mm.
And even though those things have elevated to, I think, a different degree with the work that I've done now, I'm still those experiences. I'm still my past. But once I was able to accept that past, that's when I was able to just be in the present and have a brief understanding of what the future may be.
Mm. And if you were to go back to Ann Arbor right now, doing what you
Mm-hmm.
do now and what you've created, I would be willing to bet that if you cross paths with one of the old neighbors whom you shoveled for,
Mm-hmm.
say, oh my gosh, Oleg, I'm not surprised you're where you're at right now. You were a go-getter, a hard worker.
Yeah.
You know, you proactively went out there to grow and to create something and to
Yes.
people. So yeah, I mean, time can make such a difference in our perception of something we said or did. I mean, in August 2003, I literally spent over an hour hitting golf balls at a driving range, under power lines, barefoot in the wet grass during a thunderstorm, daring God to hit me. That's kind of where my
Mm.
life was at the time.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, I described it as the stupidest thing I've ever done. That actually, the next day, a life coach I was working with me asked me a question. And I started telling him the story, and he thought it was funny. And he said, have you ever thought of being a stand-up comedian or a motivational speaker? Because of the stupidest thing I'd ever done, it is what made me become
Yeah.
a professional speaker. It literally is the day.
Mm-hmm.
So what I once described as, you know, hurricane knucklehead category 5 level of stupid is why I'm a speaker now. And it's essentially the point in my history which
Mm-hmm.
led to us having this conversation.
Yeah.
It's the fact that the stupidest thing I ever did led to the greatest years of my life.
Yeah.
So time and being outside it a bit and seeing, that's who I was at the time. And I was being funny when I said it. Go ahead, I dare you to hit me. And I actually swung the club around, laughing to myself. Go ahead, I dare you. And in the next day, Coach Dan asked me the question, and
Mm-hmm.
here we are. So, time lets us kind of reshuffle the deck a little bit. Where
Mm-hmm.
we thought we had a losing hand way back in the day, all of a sudden we're looking at aces because we stayed in the game.
Yeah.
And oh, loser, throw it out. Now you know how thankful I am that I did that day and didn't get hit, because now I've got this amazing story that other people who are maybe in the storm of their life right now
Mm-hmm.
and saying, I just want out of this, realize that, okay, you had to have that day, but
Mm-hmm.
you also need to be around the right people who ask you the right questions
Yes.
and listen to them when they reach out with a helping hand and just say, what can I do, right now, or what's going on, or what's in your head, or, you know, it could just change your life.
Mm-hmm.
And people like you, that's why we're having this conversation, because I loved your show. I loved your conversation with Brian. I love the conversation that we had on your show,
Mm-hmm.
I said, well, now I want to have Oleg on my show. And as we wrap up, because I do see the timer and I want to be very respectful of your schedule, how
Mm-hmm.
can people learn more, Oleg, or find the Overcoming Odds podcast or more information about you?
Mm-hmm. I think the best way to do so is through our website, and that is overcomingodds.today. On it, you'll be able to see our podcast episodes, including the one that you and I had on that particular show. Different ways that you can get involved as far as sharing your story and taking ownership of the things that you've gone through. And also know that there are other people along similar journeys within this community who have been through some of the challenges that you're facing. And the third thing that I can think of is the events that we will be hosting around the country. And we've had quite a few this far. I think we'll be having our 10th one next month in San Diego. Um, and these are experiences really where you can start the journey of developing courage with your own story and taking ownership of the things that you've gone through in life and hearing other people along similar paths in life and the transformation that they have been through. So, those are some of the ways that people can get in touch. You and I had connected through, I think it was either LinkedIn or Facebook to begin with. So,
Mm-hmm.
those platforms are also fair game for something like that. But for any of those that are listening, if there's any final words that I can leave with any of the listeners, it is that never give up. Never give up on your dreams. I think it's the most important thing. And no matter how challenging it may get, just understand that there's always someone else watching at you. There's always someone else following your lead. There's always someone else that is using you as a role model or an example to get through a particular challenge. And once we're able to understand that, then I think we can step into living with our imperfections and knowing that you don't have to have the best environment to make a video. You don't have to have the best X, Y, and Z to start. All you need to know is just, I have to start. You don't need to know the how. As one of my friends had told me, you don't need to know the how for getting to a particular target. You just need to know where to start.
Mm-hmm.
And you figure out the how as you go, one step at
Yeah.
a time.
And if nothing else, you look it up on YouTube
Yeah,
because you can
exactly.
learn anything there. And
The
it's
resources are there.
oh my gosh, it's incredible. I actually use it all the time to learn stuff. And as I shared with somebody the other day, somebody who's crushing it in her life right now, I
Mm-hmm.
said, remember how great you feel right now and continue every single day to do what you're doing now at the best of your ability because there's somebody in the shadows praying for a hero right now. And here's what I want you to never, ever, ever forget. You used to be in the shadows.
Yes.
So don't ever forget that you were there and now you've grown in your journey.
Mm-hmm.
Always remember that there's still people in the shadows who are praying for a hero.
Yeah.
Be a hero just for showing somebody what's possible and for turning around, looking over your shoulder and reaching a hand out to anybody who might be willing to make the climb,
Yeah.
just looking for that. Well, you could change someone's life like that with a
Yeah.
kind word or a smile. Or
Mm-hmm.
even as I said to somebody at line at a grocery store, she didn't have a big smile on her face, but I turned around and said, that is the coolest hat I've seen all day. And she just started laughing. She didn't look real happy before. And I just said that, and she burst out laughing. She goes, oh my God, my daughter got me this. And then all of a sudden, she was so, I mean, she was probably just thinking about something, but she was so animated all of a sudden. And I walked away saying, I'm so glad I said something about her hat. Man, that made my day.
Yeah.
And everybody around us, that is a lovely hat. And
Mm-hmm.
she was queen for a moment and it felt great because I don't know what's going on in her life, but she just didn't look engaged or happy. And I just wanted to say, I really dig your hat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Oleg, thank you so much. I am grateful to you for not only having me on your show, but also being willing to be a part of a conversation here on my show as well for all of the
Mm-hmm.
people that are in my universe to learn more about you. So thank you very much, my friend.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me on. Thank you for creating this platform. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to be me and share my story to the best of my ability.
You are very welcome.